Hello, all, and welcome to Encamp's Guided Environmental Compliance webinar, The 5 Steps to Digital Transformation. Just a little bit about me. I am Brandon Barlow. I'm the Environmental Marketing and Events Manager here at Encamp. I've been here for about 3 years, but I come from the environmental industry. So a bulk of that 10 years of experience, I have been with the environmental consultant firm, and that's where I actually met Luke Jacobs. So Luke, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Awesome. Thanks, Brandon. Hey, everybody. Thanks for hopping on our webinar. We're hoping to make this informative and borderline even fun for all of you. But I'm Luke, co-founder, CEO here at EndCamp. Like Brandon said, we met in a consulting firm. My background is in environmental science, consulting, working with these large corporations on really streamlining their compliance processes, and now have been here at EndCamp since the beginning, and really just been working on driving forward our mission to help organizations comply with environmental regulations. So super excited to spend a little bit of time together this afternoon.
Absolutely. I've definitely been looking forward to this one. So here's our agenda for today. I will give a little lay of the land. If you look at your menu bar at the top or bottom of your screen, depending on how your Zoom is set up, you will have a Q&A. If you do have questions, I want you to go ahead and put those questions in the Q&A chat box. I don't want you to have to remember them. We will get to them during that portion of the webinar. And also we have a chat box, and that's also right next to that button. So if you have any questions or technical difficulties, go ahead and use that chat box there. So we just did the intros. We will then get into the state of complexity. We will go over our solution. Then we will go over the 5 steps to environmental digital transformation. We would do that Q&A session at the end, and then we'll talk about the takeaways. So scattered throughout the webinar as well, we have 3 interactive polls. So we want this to be fun, like Luke said. So your participation is needed, and then we'll talk about those poll questions right after that. So a little bit about us before I hand over the presentation to Luke. What we do at Encamp, we are on a mission to really transform compliance programs and human processes into a technology-driven system that really lays the foundation for accurate and also continual environmental compliance. We do this in a blended method of intelligent high-tech solutions as well as high-touch expert support. So what we really want to do is for organizations, we want to go ahead and actually unify and build that unified data system of environmental information that you will then use to drive your environmental compliance. Luke?
Awesome. All right. So I'll just dive in. Really want to spend a little bit of time talking about kind of how EndCamp got started to put us in the context of really why we exist. And then really digging into why should you care about digital transformation if you're an environmental professional, how to think about some of the space, the complexity that you're likely dealing with as you manage these processes. And then we'll dig into some ways that we think are really good methodology with or without a company like EndCamp to just go through a process of really taking your compliance programs from where it is, which often is kind of a set of disparate data sets, spreadsheets, emails, inboxes, processes, maybe even sticky notes, however you're kind of managing the full stack, and turning this into a more systematized process that really ultimately makes it easy to do, easy to understand, accurate as you report, and overall auditable because it's in one visible system. So a little bit about kind of how the company came to be, what we're really trying to do at EndCamp. So back when I was getting into this space, working as a consultant, something that became very clear as I was looking around and working with these large companies is that it is very challenging to actually maintain compliance for really even a single location, but then that complexity really does scale as you have more and more locations in more and more different states, different jurisdictions, and ultimately have more processes running at this. In all of this, looking around, I found that there was a lot of different tools, but there's still really no playbook for how companies and how environmental professionals can start thinking about really leveraging technology to make these processes easier. And I think it's actually now 2022, I believe a real inflection point has been met where the environmental space is rapidly getting more digital. And I think it is really from the desire of the professionals themselves to level up their tools and really be a stakeholder in the modern business, where an environmental professional should have the same level of sophistication and automation in their tech stack as a finance professional or a sales professional. So as I was really at a consulting firm, love consulting firms. We actually partner with many of them, but I did see that one of the challenges that was going to occur with trying to become more technology driven from the perspective of a consultant is that it is going to actually ultimately cut into billable hours if I am relying on doing processes by hand, and instead I really want to automate them. So this seemed like a great opportunity for first principles problem solving. We're really getting the company started with the mindset of what is compliance? What does this actually mean? It really has to do with your location, your operations, and then connecting your data streams to ultimately get the right data on the right frequency so that you can actually get it submitted. And we've been working very hard building software that does just that. So let's talk a little bit about digital transformation. Brandon, if you want to jump to the next slide. So you can kind of look on the screen, read some of these quotes and stats, but generally the idea that is represented here is that digital transformation and digital maturity for organizations is increasingly relevant. And really, if you are not thinking about how you are going to digitally transform your organization and your processes over the coming years, you are likely going to be behind the eight ball, maybe not immediately, but really in 2025, 2030, these are trends that are rapidly picking up and I think have really strong tailwinds as organizations are trying to move forward with this. So if you read through some of these, I think the main takeaway is that digital transformation is very important. And also if it's not done well, it is hard to actually get value from any of your digital processes. So you need to be thinking about it systematically rather than just thinking about really getting like out of the box, kind of off the shelf software. I think everyone in the audience, if you're an environmental professional, I think you're well aware that the devil is in the details in any sort of environmental problem. And so really making sure that it is tailored to your situation is absolutely critical to be able to truly get the benefits that you want. So, basically the idea is it's a good idea to digitally transform, and it is a good idea to also think systematically about how you go through that process. So let's dive in a little bit about the state of complexity. Brandon, next slide. Sweet. So really, I think when you break down what is the challenge that you face as an environmental professional and what is the pain and the frustration, it essentially comes down to the fact that regulations are changing, reporting requirements also change, and there is a lot of information that must be tracked really well in advance of any sort of compliance report to have the right information to ultimately report on. So as I would really kind of describe this in a very mathematical sense, this is a combinatorial problem space. It is the intersection. If we go to the next slide, we've got a little equation. It's the intersection of essentially your facilities across different jurisdictions that have requirements based on their operations. All of that put together really does give you a picture of your compliance surface area and the complexity that you're actually going to be managing in. This is something where really, as we see, companies deal with interjurisdictionality, where a facility in Indiana and a facility in Illinois might be 50 miles away from each other, might do similar things, and will have really concrete differences in their compliance requirements, what data needs to be collected, when does it need to be collected, and then the method that you actually need to submit to the various regulators. This could be your state agency, a local agency, all the way up to then these federal standards with EPA and other kind of larger regulatory bodies. So really, as we look at this, what we're trying to do with EndCamp and what we want to do with digital transformation is map each of these components that go into this function to provide environmental professionals this unified view where they can see what data do I have at what locations? How do I make sure that I'm collecting it correctly? And then one of the things we really specialize in at EndCamp that I do believe is truly kind of the future of how environmental reporting in particular works is by focusing on reporting automation so that you have really the TurboTax use case of, if I've already collected the data and it's in a structured format for a report, being able to hit a button and have that data get transacted accurately and in the right way to the right regulators and all get tied up in a bow for you rather than copy pasting all day, which is, I think the status quo is lots and lots of copy pasting and moving data back and forth between various spreadsheets. So if you're kind of with us so far, this is it's a little bit abstract, but we really do think it is a good way to start thinking about truly the kind of explosion of complexity that you, the environmental professional, are faced with, particularly as you go from 1 to 10 to 50 to 100 locations, maybe multiple hundreds of locations, different jurisdictions. And then if you really think about going global, it's just adding to this where you now have different countries and all sorts of different regulatory frameworks that are going to continue to really expand out the kind of reporting complexity that you'll be dealing with. So that's kind of like overall what the space looks like. Let's talk a little bit about how we think about approaching this to bring a bit more clarity and really a peace of mind to professionals in this space so that they're not left kind of chasing all these threads and always feeling a little bit under the gun. Everything is a fire drill. So really, ultimately, this comes down to a data-driven paradigm that is reliant on being proactive and taking really an upfront approach that begins with the facility. So the way we do this at EndCamp to transform an environmental process for our customers, we work with a lot of large Fortune 1000 customers, really begins with first saying, can we get a list of your facilities in your locations and really build that into a canonical data set, which is in our platform, essentially each facility being represented by its own facility profile. So you want to start with, what facilities do I have? Where are they? What information do they have? What doing business do they have? Who's the emergency contact? What regulatory IDs exist? Just think of all of the information that you might be referencing about a facility. The first step is really gathering that and getting that centralized in one location. This is often one of the bigger initial kind of tasks as you're thinking about digital transformation, because it really is compounded in terms of its really value to the user, to the professional, by getting all the information in one place. So first, really starts with get all your facilities. Once you've gotten your facilities, then you want to start setting up your data pipelines. This is really just a fancy way of saying what data needs to get added to that facility record and how frequently does it need to get added. So an example I really like to use that is an analog into finance is imagine QuickBooks tying into your different bank accounts, and then on a periodic basis, maybe monthly, that's going to actually get your books closed and you'll have a record. So you need to first say, like, I have a data pipeline though. I need to get my information from my bank account into my QuickBooks. For a facility, this is something like, I need to be able to get my hazardous inventories. I need to know what materials are on my site. Maybe I need to be tracking my safety data sheets that are coming on site. I have hazardous waste that's being produced, so I need to be tracking my manifests that are being written, the waste that's being produced, shipped off. All that information would be really broken down into different data pipelines, and you would really take a comprehensive look and say, because my facility has EPCR reporting requirements, RCRA reporting requirements, Clean Air Act reporting requirements, what have you, I need to be collecting data on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis, and then really making sure that there's just a path for that data to get into the system. So now we've got facilities. Your facilities are getting their data, the right data, which is really a huge step, and it's getting all unified in one place. And now, since you are tracking it in one location, you are able to essentially see if any of that data is precipitating a change that is going to require a sort of compliance notification, update, maybe a re-notification if there's been a material change. So an example of this is generator status for hazardous waste facilities. If you're producing hazardous waste, every month and you're an SQG, and then you trigger and become an LQG because you've produced more waste, that requires filing a notification to the EPA, most likely to your state regulators as well, to make that notification. It's often something that gets people tripped up, actually, in the sense that if you're not tracking that data with the continuous data collection, these data pipelines, it's hard to necessarily know, have I crossed the threshold? Has something happened at my location that makes me need an update to happen, a notification to happen? If you put it in one system, kind of at a minimum, it gets flagged and you are easily able to see, okay, this has happened. I need to be able to take a necessary action. I'll file my update. And then really, I think, with the next kind of iteration of thinking, and it's the position we take, really, it's all about reporting automation. So if that trigger takes place, I've crossed into a new generator status. I have a new hazardous material that's an extremely hazardous substance, and I need to file a 302 notification, for instance. That is something that not only gets flagged in the system, but then there is a way to automate actually sending off that information to the regulator, and this all gets rolled back into your facility profile. So each of these squares is almost its own little feedback loop into the previous one, because everything is building onto that facility record. The end of this really is then automating your compliance reporting. So if you have set up all your facilities, you're collecting the right data every month, you're basically closing the books, so to speak, on that facility every month for each of its program areas. Anytime there's a change throughout the year, you're filing that kind of inter notification, between these periods of compliance reporting. All of that builds up to the point where you have these large annual reports. This would be a biennial report. It would be a Title V. It would be a Tier 2 report, with all of that information really unified in one system for each facility. Then you have the capability to actually start looking at automating that so that the regulators can get that information in a timely manner, in a consistent manner. And frankly, you can achieve peace of mind to know that it's just been done properly and on time, and that you have a record that is actually auditable, which I think is really critical. So it's a lot of stuff throwing at you. One kind of final concept that I think is really interesting that we've actually seen working with our customers that has increasingly become, I think, a really valuable kind of component of this process that frankly has even sort of surprised us, is that if you go through this process, not only do you have your compliance reports, but what you also have is your negative report, which is essentially being able to show, why did this facility report, but this one didn't? And if you have it all set up in one system and the data is flowing in every month, it's very easy to say, well, this one crossed the threshold, this one didn't, and we have the ability to document that. So I think it's something that's really interesting if you do think about how audit ready you are and how prepared you are to really prove that you have made the right decisions. If anyone starts asking questions, if there's an inspection, I think this is a really kind of surefire path to not only report what needs to be reported, but ensure that you have documentation of why you are not reporting what doesn't need to report. Little counterintuitive, but it's actually, I think, really quite relevant. All right, so that's a bunch of kind of like information, digital transformation, data pipelines. So let's open it up, and Brandon has a poll, and let's kind of pulse the room and see where we're at on this right now, just with the attendees who are currently here.
Yeah, thank you, Luke. All right, let me jump into the poll here. So this is our first poll question. Just a small caveat, if you do have a second screen, the actual poll question might pop up on that screen. So just be mindful of that. I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll now. So on a scale of 1 to 5, how is your organization using digital transformation to manage different facilities, jurisdictions, requirements, and change management? This is 1 being you guys are not thinking about digital transformation at all, and 5 being your organization. This is the #1 goal of 2022. Luke, I wanted to double tap on something you were talking about earlier in this kind of automated kind of compliance reporting. Is that what really separates us from our other digital or tech competitors in the space?
Definitely. So I would really say, if you want to understand the way that we view the world and what we're trying to accomplish at EndCamp, is that we're an environmental data company that's really focused on last mile reporting, automation and documentation. So what this means is that for all of the systems that you may use, because there really are a lot, many of them do many different things quite well. Your Cordies, your Gen Suites, I get to think they're now Benchmark, ESG, Process Map, what have you. There are other systems that are great for kind of containing information, but then there is this continual challenge of once you have that information, you're not actually in compliance with anything. All you have is really the data. And so we've really taken this approach where we're building the infrastructure that allows that data to go from your facility record to the right regulator and basically have a feedback of like, that did happen. We sent it, it's been documented, it comes back. We actually make payments for processing fees. There are all sorts of complexity in it. But if I was really going to boil it down to a sentence, absolutely. I would say the primary thesis of EndCamp is that your reporting pipelines should be automated and digital so that you're not spending your time, your Q1, copy pasting, hundreds and hundreds of lines out of spreadsheets and really trying to just manage this process in a kind of ad hoc basis. It's super stressful. I've filed many tier 2 reports, biannual reports by hand, and I can say, I did enough that I wanted to make them automated, truly. So yeah, I'd say that's really our differentiator. And if we're thinking about how we think about the world in the future, I do believe whether it's EndCamp or other systems, this is going to become infrastructure on the level of truly like TurboTax's e-filing, where if you are not utilizing that, you're probably making it harder than it needs to be for yourself. So it's a big challenge. There are lots of data paths across the US and the world, but that's where we put essentially all of our focus to really make sure that once the data is standardized and organized, it also has the process of getting reported to the government. I think something you touched on as well, Brandon, this just has me thinking, but I do think it is important to think about with an environmental system, it really is a human and computer interaction where you need to be able to translate physical things that exist at your locations. There are people working on different initiatives. You might need to count stuff. You need to actually have those people be able to interface with your also computerized systems, or else it's going to be very challenging to accomplish the outcomes that you want. So I think just as you think about a digital transformation process, I would say is always going to involve taking into account not only what can you get done with software, but what are you going to have your people do, and also what support can you get on an implementation process and scoping out what is this going to actually look like, because it is a transformative process. It can happen quickly, but it needs to be well thought out. And I think it helps a lot to have experts who have done it before and can help guide you along the way so that you really don't miss a beat and achieve an order of magnitude increase in your efficiency over time.
Absolutely. I'm going to now just kind of share results, kind of what you would probably expect at the moment here. So, we have 44% of people saying they're at a 3. So that is, not the worst, not the best, but it is good that almost everyone in this room is probably at the right webinar and thinking about digital transformation. All right. I'm going to put the polls down. We're going to move on to the next slide here. And Luke, go ahead and talk about our solution.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been kind of talking about it already, but I would say the way we approach this is really with EndCamp, what we provide to our customers is the best aspects of working with a top tier environmental consulting firm with also implementing cutting edge and just really modern software that is built completely with first principles in mind about essentially having the highest leverage possible on the places that provide the most challenge to environmental professionals. So really, when we come into an organization, it does begin with a lot of questions. We want to understand, how is this process currently working? What are the goals that you have for the program for sustainability? Who all is involved in your data collection processes? Where is this data coming from? How does it look right now? Really, we get in the weeds with our customers, because I think if you don't have that context, this is where you have really I'd say buyer's remorse with software, because it is not normally kind of off the shelf. Doesn't normally just work perfectly for any software. You have to map it into your systems and your processes, especially at the enterprise level. So we have this method that we really just call guided environmental compliance, where we have our compliance architects who are involved along with our account executives as we get involved with the customer to really understand the state of the data, start mapping the facilities, start connecting your data pipelines. And then I'd say really once the data pipelines are there, that's when you start kind of getting these, your monthly statements, you're off to the races, so to speak, where now you're tracking the information. You have the ability to start automating off these notifications and any sub-reports. And then really it's always building towards each annual cycle for a given regulatory program area. It's going to be building towards tax season, so to speak. I really like to use the finance metaphors because I think, one, they kind of help you understand like what's going on and people are familiar with TurboTax, QuickBooks. But then two, I really think that as environmental professionals, we should all be thinking like, how come finance has stuff like QuickBooks and TurboTax and these pieces of technology that are incredibly useful, and in many ways it would be so kind of outrageous to think of an accountant who's not using any of those systems, and then really thinking that environmental professionals deserve that level of sophistication from their technology as well. So it's all about kind of working with the company, understanding the problem, and then from there, that's when we start bringing you on the technology. So Brandon, we can go next slide.
Absolutely.
And essentially, this is reiterating it, but it's combining our high-tech solutions with our high-touch expert support. So really our two kind of primary kind of groups that are involved in our product is we are hiring the best software engineers that really exist and that are coming on and really diving into solving this with truly kind of future looking and sophisticated methodology, really great engineers. And then we hire top tier environmental consultants who staff our customer success team, our implementation team, and really help make sure that our customers and anyone who is interested in even really beginning to explore this process isn't going into this alone, because that's where you have really a mismatch in terms of what you want to get out of it and what you do get out of it. And I think when you get it aligned, truly, I think it is kind of revolutionary to how you view your work. Once you start seeing how this really can be, it's something that makes me just extremely excited to see our customers succeed as they get up to speed with this and start seeing how much you can really automate in the process and how much more you'll have visibility and confidence into your processes if you go and do really this work, but this important transformative work that pays off for years and years to come. And yeah, I would say also in this is just another thought, but it is something that allows you to have continuity and change management in your program over time, which is also essential as you start thinking, how do I add more people? How do I maybe transition to a different role, move up in the organization, what have you? Who's there to pick this up? And if it's all living in different people's heads and different spreadsheets, that becomes a real challenge. If you get this work done and you get it unified, now you have a system rather than really a set of different tasks that are all running all over the place. So yeah, that's guided environmental compliance. We also have an ebook that I believe will be at the end of this, which does a really great job just kind of breaking this down and going deeper into the process.
Yeah, look, you brought up something that we often talk about is in the environmental space, we have a lot of tenure. So Jane Doe, who's director of environmental, has been working there for 30 years, and maybe she's retiring in 6 months. Mm. What are we doing with that, institutional knowledge? How do we get that out of her head? If we don't have a system, how do we set the next manager up for success? So yeah, I really like how you double tapped on that. All right, so we are at poll number 2 here. Again, I'm going to read the poll question. I'll give you guys a chance to answer, and then me and Luke will kind of riff on something. Let's see. All right, poll number 2, I'm going to launch now. All right, what is currently driving your organization's digital transformation? Is it a desire to increase operational efficiencies, a need to ensure business continuity, scalability, data security, all the above, or that one at the bottom there. My organization doesn't have any digital transformation initiatives, which I don't think anybody in this actual webinar is kind of lives in that category. So, Luke, is there anything that stands out to you as far as one of these that is more important than the other?
It's a good question. I would say probably not any that are more important than the others. I would say something that maybe in terms of like, I would hope that everyone here has at least some amount of technology they are using. And I think importantly with this is making the realization that this is actually a place where you want more different tools that connect together in ways that make sense, more than I would say the concept of the one-stop shop system, which I do genuinely think is a bit of a myth, where it goes back to this sort of like the equation of the complexity. The one-stop shop doesn't actually get any of that complexity fully solved. I would say it's a bit of a master of none solution. So it's interesting as people make these evaluations, I think it's often easy to think, well, I have too many different things already going on. How do I find one system that will be able to bring everything in? And I would encourage people to think about actually how you balance sort of incrementally turning your different systems into one set of processes, because otherwise it can be very challenging to try to rip and replace these big and embedded different systems that you may have. So that's not really even answering the question, but I think it is an interesting component of this as we work with large organizations evaluating this. I think it's useful to go in assuming that there are going to be different ways to solve it, but that it's unlikely that there will be a single system that will become your system for every single thing relevant to environmental. It's a lot of stuff. So yeah, that's the take.
All right. So we've got our poll question results back. The only thing that kind of stood out to me was that no one kind of clicked on data security being something that they were kind of looking for digital transformation to solve. So maybe they have other systems or something else in place. What I want to really ask you about, Luke, is for someone who's like, all right, I already have a system in place that gathers data. Do I need an EndCamp, and what for? Can you tap on that?
Yeah, totally. So I think I'd say the short answer is yes, but it does depend on what all you're doing, just honestly. So I mean, it's hard to have a blanket statement, but I would say basically if you're already collecting data in a system, it is better to begin looking at automation programs like EndCamp than if you aren't actually using any system at all, because what you've already done is set up on at least some level these data pipelines, and the data pipelines are critical. So if you are using a Gen Suite, if you're using a Velocity EHS, that's actually something we work with lots of companies where they have their information about their chemical inventories. It might be a giant spreadsheet that is exported, so they have trouble knowing how do you turn that into compliance reports? How do I make sure this is paid? There's so many different people you need to send stuff to. That's where really we come in to say that we know where we actually have the kind of like operational capabilities that are second to none to actually get that last mile delivery. And so I would say it's a mix. As companies are evaluating this, some companies are coming to us with, really just it's spreadsheets, for instance. There's not a lot of stuff set up, or maybe they're using SAP and we're pulling that in. Others might be a lot more integrated into different systems, but they're running into this reinventing the wheel each year to do reporting. It's very challenging. It's hard to know who will take it over when the person who's doing it or the team doing it moves on. So I would say that really wherever you are along your digital transformation journey, there's an opportunity to look at basically both the upstream and downstream processes, because there's often really, I think this is a big tent space, to be honest. It's a big problem. So I think in general, being able to think more holistically about what jobs to be done you've got at different stages is really a good way to think about it, rather than thinking about the need to have a singular system that can do every single thing, because I think that it's just very challenging to actually get that promise out of that type of system.
All right. Luke, thank you for that. Let's go ahead and dive into these 5 steps of digital transformation.
Cool. All right. So I think we'll go through these. I'm kind of curious, maybe we can make it more interactive if people have questions, because this is really what we're going through. But I think, if we want to run through the steps, we first really have establishing your facility compliance foundations. Your goal really is that you want to have one location where you can say, how many locations do I have? What states are they in? Just like, what is the baseline that I'm dealing with? The value is that really, if this is in one location, it dramatically decreases the risk of errors. I would say it's really hard to improve things that you can't measure. It's also hard to catch mistakes that you cannot see. This is something we're bringing this in and unifying it does really help. And this is even if the data is coming in from multiple sources, getting it aggregated in a single location, incredibly useful. So our methodology really, as we've gone through, this is essentially working with customers to be able to understand, where's this information living? How are you currently doing this? And then starting to help them map how they're going to start getting that data all unified together. So that's really step 1. Step 2 is then your compliance data collection. So you want to make this as continuous as possible. The goal really would be fully continuous. If you've got the capabilities, you want to be collecting as much data as you can. But I think, more realistically is on a daily, weekly, maybe even monthly basis. It depends on the program and kind of the requirements and the frequency. The value really is that you will miss many fewer things if you have regular data collection. So this stat, it actually leads to a dramatic, like 2/3 decrease in missing reporting deadlines if you actually have upfront and regular data collection methods, because again, you can't really report on what you don't know about. So if it's not set up, it's going to be very challenging to know, did I hit that 60-day notification window when I brought that extremely hazardous substance on site? Very hard to capture that if you're not actually doing regular data collection to understand even what is coming onto those sites and kind of what's the underlying materials. The way we really do this is, again, just working with internal stakeholders. This often involves different systems to really map where's this data living, and then how do we start attaching it into the facility data object so that you can see it for the facility in one location. All right, let's go to step 3. So then automate updates and notifications. So once you've collected the data, you're seeing if different things have changed. What you really want to be able to do from a goal is to be able to automate that kind of sub-notification to maintain a facility's compliance on an ongoing basis. Great example of this is emergency contacts. If you have someone who's emergency contact for a regulated facility, if they leave, their name could exist on that facility's emergency contact, their phone number, but really it could be years. We see this a lot when we engage with customers where we're like, we are pulling publicly available data sets about your RCRA facilities, and it looks like 5 of these people haven't worked there for a year, 2 years, and that's something that really is easy to miss. And if you don't have automated processes, just the amount of sort of propagated errors that you can find can be pretty high. The goal of really automating this is eliminate that just broadly. I think our stat, essentially, you can draw down your NOV goal should be essentially 0. No notices of violation, because you can actually stay on top of this as you move through your process and not rely on noticing a thing and telling someone else who then fills out a piece of paper, who then sends it somewhere. The more you can make that process just happen automatically, the lower the probability anything gets missed for sure. And really the way that we do this with EndCamp is it's essentially giant cross-index referencing of different tables for thresholds, different materials, and anything in your data set that's going to trigger a required notification or update that gets flagged in the system when it gets changed, and then you can kick out the automated report and notification to the regulator, get that updated, keep all of your information really across all the different places that your facility information lives, all these state portals, federal portals, anywhere, keeping that all up to date from one centralized hub, which allows you to really have like a one-to-many notification and update system. So really, cuts down on so many potential issues and errors if you really only have one place to track all this. All right, we're getting there. So 4, you want to automate your compliance reporting. When you get to the end of your reporting cycle, this could be, a lot of it is like happening in Q1 for folks, but we've got, say, TRI coming up in July. You've got these different deadlines. Once you have all of your facilities, the right data is being collected on the right frequency, you've made all your little sub updates, then you really want to automate this reporting so that it is transmitted accurately to the government, right format, right time, and you can prove that it happened. So basically, that's the idea. This has a couple different real benefits, but broadly, it comes down to time savings, risk mitigation, and then really business continuity. So as you're thinking about all of the work, either internal or with a consultant, that goes into actually doing the reporting, documenting the reporting, maybe redoing things if you catch errors, if you get flagged for doing something incorrectly, all of this really gets decreased and simplified if you get an automated process, because it allows you to catch the errors up front. It allows you to not have to spend your people time typing in data. And then ultimately, it does just drive your operational efficiency and makes it easy for someone else to pick it up and keep the process going the next year instead of reinventing the wheel again and again and again. So really the way we do this is essentially we automate filing everything: mailers, digital submissions, payments. If it needs to be filed, we automate filing it for at least the reports that we're currently in, and rapidly expanding across the regulatory reporting landscape. All right, and then step 5. This is sort of I'd say it is how it becomes a flywheel, where steps 1 through 4, you really want to do that for a given regulation first to make sure. Oh, interesting. Well, we've got questions in chat, but we'll get to those. But you want to think about this actually as an incremental process, where, like, how do you eat an elephant? Well, you want to do it one bite at a time. It's really hard to think about doing this all at once. So if you think about coming in and all the way back to step 1, if you're like, what is my program area that is really my biggest challenge? Maybe it's my hazardous waste program. That is the one that I'm going to start with. You go through the process, you've set up all your facilities, you're collecting all your haz waste data, you're doing your 8712 notifications, your state level updates, then you do your 8713s, your biennials, you're good, success, it's amazing. Now you want to go and say, great, what's my next program? Because this feeds into the next one. So if you pick another, essentially program, you're now going to do your chemicals, you're going to do your air program, what have you. You go through the steps again, you set up more data pipelines, make sure that it gets automated and kind of rolled out properly. And then over time, you'll actually move from being really where you are now with kind of a bunch of different systems, all the way to where in the future, over a period of probably 2 to 3 years normally, you'll be able to really digitally transform your entire process to a point where a lot of the work is truly being done in a consistent manner by a set of software and protocols that allow you to actually have confidence that it's happening correctly. And then something that I think is probably on a lot of people's minds, will help you free up time to concentrate on other really important initiatives like sustainability, ESG, other programs that really are important, increasingly top of mind for folks, and are hard to get to if you're constantly battling the ongoing daily and weekly and monthly nature of collecting compliance data and submitting these updates and reports. So I would say the long-term goal is really unify your whole process. I think that it's really a wise strategy to assess that from a 1 or 2 program area at a time process, and be thoughtful and iterative, and then make sure that you continue to move through it, because the outcomes are really, I think, so worth it. But being thoughtful about how you kind of roll it out and going one step at a time before you're ultimately trying to unify the whole thing is a good way to think about it, based on my experience just seeing hundreds of companies go through this process.
Absolutely. Thank you, Luke, for that. We're going to kind of go through the next few slides here. We're sitting at around with 2:45, so I want to give us enough time for a proper Q&A. So let me go ahead and launch this poll really quickly. Sorry about that. I'm going to This is to be a quick poll just to see if you want to learn more. Luke, we do have a question in Q&A. We can kind of talk about this right now. So I'm going to say this applies to tier 2. So on average, how long does it take for Encamp to process my reports from verification to final submission? Is the system agile enough to handle when I scale and add new facilities and chemicals? Great question.
Yeah, great questions for sure. So the short answer is that the system is very agile to allow you to scale. I think on average, I was just looking at this data, I believe it is something on the matter of 6 days from verification to final submission on average for us, just across the entire customer set. Although we do have that getting faster and faster the closer you get to the reporting deadline. I haven't missed a reporting deadline for a customer as we've gone through the process. As far as scalability, 6.7 days we have. Fantastic. So as far as scalability, we processed thousands of reports. So this last tier 2 season, I think we processed a little more than 7,000 total reports. That's tracking well over 100,000 different products that are being assessed against threshold planting quantities on a state level, county level, really all the way down to like mixture component level to make sure that everything is caught. So you know, it is an extremely extensible and quick process. And I would say actually, outside of the system capabilities, truly it is also our people working with customers who really do help with that process as well. Because if you work with EndCamp, if you pick up the phone and call your person, you're going to talk to a real human, and they're going to be a person who has worked with you closely. Your customer success manager is going to have context on you and your goals, your challenges, and really be able to provide value that is, I think, a lot more than you might kind of expect from a normal, like a support line or something like that. So, you know, the software needs to be fast, responsive, and scalable, but also the people in the system really need to as well to make sure that you, the customer, ultimately achieve your goals.
Yep. Yeah, I'll come back to that point here. As you see, we have a few of our customers here that are in a wide range of industries. So we've got a chemical manufacturer. We're talking, you know, thousands of chemicals at a few locations. Or if you have a organization with hundreds and hundreds of sites across 49 states, we have a real solution for you.
Yeah, I think for a range, our customer with the most sites definitely has well over 1,000, and our customer with the most chemicals on site also has like thousands and thousands, probably like 5,000 or 6,000 products individual location. That might actually be conservative, but pretty high volume, both in terms of distribution and I'd say like depth of complexity within a facility, which is fun. It's a fun challenge for sure.
Yeah, one of the things that makes me smile every time I see this number increase is that for every filed report with Encamp, we actually plant a tree. So we are up to 18,289 since 2018. So we honestly believe what's good for business can equal good for the environment.
Yeah, awesome. Well, hey, we've got some Q&A, Brandon, actually, that I'd love to dive into. So I'll jump into these. So we've got a first question. Appreciate that you love the analogy to TurboTax, automating tax filings. And so what sort of environmental filing error implications are you seeing with respect to people who file environmental compliance manually and make human errors on those filings? So it's a great question. I would say that there are broadly kind of two real issues. So, I mean, in terms of types of errors, there are all sorts of types of errors that people are filing by hand. I mean, it could be something as you know, typing in something just incorrectly. You know, clerical errors happen. Numbers don't make sense. It's really easy to add an extra zero after a number if you've been copy pasting all day. So the type of errors are all over. But I would say in terms of the implications, there's really the first implication is a direct risk of non-compliance. So if it's wrong, you know, you might be out of compliance. That's going to potentially result in a notice of violation. You're going to potentially have to, you know, pay a fine, deal with whatever ramifications there are. It does depend on the regulation. But I mean, broadly, you know, for say tier 2, if the government wants to fine you to the maximum of their capabilities, this starts around $55,000 per violation per day. So it often is lower than that. You often don't want to actually get to the point where you are paying that. You will want to correct it and work with them. But technically, like the first implication is just like you are out of compliance and you can receive a monetary fine. And depending on the severity of RCRA violation or Clean Air Act violation, this could result in full-on facility stoppage until you correct it, which is really that's kind of the ultimate downside. The second implication, though, I would really say is sort of the knock-on effect of once that thread starts getting pulled on with an initial error. If you're not confident that everything else has been done correctly, other things may be surfaced. And so I would say the safest way to avoid having more and more questions kind of asked in a regulatory review process is to have a really kind of like ironclad initial process where you don't have some of these smaller errors that then might lead to larger questions, which could unearth other potentially systematic errors that you have. So it's kind of like a direct and indirect issues can arise that we have seen. And it is something where then even from the individual perspective, you want to try to have your name attached with data that is as accurate as possible and just make sure that you feel confident in the data itself. So that's the first question. Let's go to a second one. What clients and or industries are you seeing that are taking advantage of this technology? For example, you see the most acceptance in, nice. In auto manufacturing, R&D. So it's a great question. I would say broadly, for at least the industries we're working with, there's kind of either very deep and complex, so chemical manufacturing, auto manufacturing, surfaces, like anything that has maybe not as many locations, but each location is very, very complex. I think they can really take advantage of this because you're doing kind of like bulk analysis on a lot of different information. On the other hand, then there is sort of shallower, but wider. So we work with lots of some of the largest retailers in the world, big shipping and logistics companies, warehousing companies, anyone who is trying to keep track of 500 different big box stores and warehouses that you might be running that have forklifts, lead acid battery powered man lifts, any sort of things in your inventory that you might be holding. One of the interesting things from 2020 and 2021, lots of hand sanitizer being inventoried in places in really huge bulk quantities. So I think for those use cases, it is really effective to have a scaled infrastructure system because actually just getting the reports filed to 100, 200, 1,000 different endpoints becomes a real challenge. And it's hard to even know if you've done all of it if you're trying to keep track of this with, for instance, highlighting cells on an Excel sheet for your 1,000 facilities. It's really hard to keep track. And then you're like nailing stuff. It's tough. We've got a couple minutes. I'm just going to keep going. So leadership likes to see tangible goals to consider investing in technology. What are some of the tangible and long-term goals I can give them for investing in environmental compliance technology? This is a great question. I do think it is a challenging one because it depends on your situation. If there is going to be a cost saving, which there might be. If you're using a consultant, for instance, and you want to implement the technological solution, this might ultimately result in some cost savings, some time savings. I think second is actually trying to quantify what is the risk that you're currently holding and how can you mitigate that risk and almost price it internally like you would price insurance. If you can pay an amount upfront to make sure that you have less of a probability of a really calamitous downside, that has a value. It really does depend on like how your organization works, but we see that with a lot of organizations for sure. I think the third is really starting to ask the hard questions of business continuity and what happens if someone leaves, if we add more locations, if you leave, just how does the process continue? And again, tying this back into risk where you really can show that we're in the Great Resignation, for instance. This is a period where there's lots of churn, people are leaving businesses. I think it is very possible to craft a proposal within a company to say, this is actually something where we need to put in place a process that allows us to not only get in compliance, but stay in compliance. Because if we have these people leave, for instance, and it's January, we will not be able to do it. And it will not be good. We'll have lots of violations. those are three. A fourth one we've seen that's emerging is that a lot of companies are creating ESG initiatives, and ESG initiatives seem to be getting a lot of kind of like, good momentum at a board level. And I think being able to tie, there are a couple things. So we plant trees for each report we file. So we've actually prepared reports for some companies that help them, calculate this as a carbon offset essentially on a per location basis. Works better if you're in oil and gas for that, since it's like a large facility, planting a tree is not going to be that much of an offset. But if it's small wellheads, that really can be pretty material. As well as just making the kind of ROI case on opportunity costs for you or your team's time being spent on kind of clerical tasks compared to the opportunity if you want to have a no waste by 2030 or net zero carbon emissions by 2040 or anything like that. That is work that you can really draw kind of a line of like, we need to get there and we need to actually be working on it. That's going to then take time, which you can free up by actually automating a lot of these processes to essentially do more with the team that you have by strategically automating parts of your process with technology. So yeah, I don't know. I would say the most surefire way though is to really, if you talk with an EndCamp compliance specialist and an account executive, we really help dig in with this and help figure out what are the most important initiatives, what's going on in your business, and try to build something that is really a good, good business case as well as a good environmental case to make sure that it works. Because we understand at the end of the day, businesses are going to need to make decisions that are economically viable for them. So we really work hard to make sure that it's truly a value add and a positive ROI. Although it is a little bit less of, this isn't like a sales tool, so you're not going to like make more money by doing it, but you mitigate a lot of risk, and you actually ultimately, I do think, have a significantly more valuable and robust business if you have a strong compliance program. Like even just for public sentiment and investor sentiment, it's a strong case can be made for the economic validity of having a strong compliance program. But it just depends. It's different organizations. Always an interesting conversation to dive into for sure.
Yes, thank you, Luke. We have 2 minutes to spare. I just want to highlight that we are sending our guided environmental compliance ebook out to everyone via email. There is also a link in chat, actually, that's been put. So if you just want to click on that, you can go ahead and get the book that way as well. On behalf of EndCamp, I thank everyone for joining us today. And if you're interested in reaching out to us, whoa, sorry guys. You can reach out to us on LinkedIn or go to our website at encamp.com. You can also reach out to Luke and I also on LinkedIn. And we have a Women of EHS group on LinkedIn as well. If you're interested in that, that is kind of gaining some more momentum right now. So that is a pretty cool community. So Luke, anything before we close out? We've got like a minute left.
I would just say thank you all for tuning in, and you're already on the first step of your digital transformation journey by starting to get curious, learn more, and we would love to be part of your process, either directly or indirectly, because it's really our mission. We want to help companies do this, and super excited that you all chose to spend an hour of your afternoon with us.
Absolutely. We believe what's good for business can equal good for the environment. All right. Thanks, guys.